What's happening, Portia?
Hey, how you doing post birthday, boy?
Come on now. I am in my 40s. I'm feeling good. I did 40 burpees
Welcome.
to make sure I still got it.
Welcome.
Yes,
Welcome.
it's a fun club to be in. And
Absolutely.
uh,
Absolutely.
I went to a water park and slid down some slides, acted like a
Of course
big
you
kid.
did. Of course you did. I
You
would
know,
expect nothing less. Did you
it's
get a
hot
good
down here.
meal?
I did get a good meal. I went to Bucky's. You ever been to Bucky's?
No, because I would not go nowhere in Bucky's. Tell me more.
I'm gonna tell you later because we're supposed to be talking business.
Oh, yes. Oh, my God. I forgot about y'all. How you doing? I'm so busy. Like, what is Bucky's? How y'all doing?
Welcome, everybody. My name is Will Snowden. I am the director of the Juror Project.
And I am his wing girl, Porsha-Shaf Venable. I am the deputy director of the Juror Project. Hi, y'all.
You know, Portia, tonight we're talking about this concept of people power. And I think about how we are doing this work with the Juror Project to remind folks of the power that exists within the jury box. So before we even, set up this evening's call, you did some brainstorming in terms of why it is important to talk about power in this moment. Tell me a little bit about why you thought this was a good topic for tonight.
So, every sort of space that I'm in at this moment, everyone is talking about what is happening in this country. And whether we are talking about what's happening in the criminal legal system with celebrities or people that we know and love, or just people that we're just seeing on the news, right? Everyday individuals that are being subjected to the criminal legal system. And the more social media um exposure that these things get, people are talking, right? And in all of these spaces that I'm in, people are feeling fragmented, people are feeling frustrated, people are feeling really confused and exhausted about what's happening, but also interested in what to do, right? Like, what is their role in all of this? Because it feels like we're at war. It really does. And it, like, whether or not we're at war with our individuals in our community, whether it be police, prosecutors, judges, or individuals in the immigration system, ICE, or our damn government, right? Like, everyone feels like they're at war. And I wouldn't say everyone, but many folks feel like they're at war. And people are trying to figure out where to pour into their energy. And that's really where I got, this topic from. And obviously, just like everyone else, I was paying attention to the Diddy trial. I was paying attention to people's responses, no matter where you fell on the spectrum of the Diddy verdict. And it really also had me thinking, because there is so much confusion and misinformation about the role of the juries and about the role of the juror experience. And so I thought it was important to sort of unmask it, demystify it.
Well, that's what we're going to do tonight. And I appreciate you bringing up the Diddy trial. I know a lot of people have been providing commentary about it. You and I have talked about the Diddy trial in a different context, in a different way. We're not getting into the verdict per se or the merits of the case, but we're going to be
Absolutely.
focusing on the juror experience.
Right.
And one of the things that happened very early on in this case was there was a revelation that there was a juror who was not actually a resident of the jurisdiction where the trial was taking place. Tell us what happened with that, because I know you were following along the details of this case, and so wondering if you could give us some insight into what that was all about.
Sure. You know, prior to the trial actually resuming, everyone was concerned about what the jury was going to look like. Everyone is often concerned about what the jury is going to look like, because I think one of the things that we can all sort of agree on is that the more diverse the jury is, the more fair the outcome will feel, right? And so one of the jurors that got picked for the Diddy trial initially was a 41-year-old African American man. And I don't know why homeboy decided to do it, but he decided to get the talking. and he started telling some folks that he actually lived in Jersey but maintained a residence in the Bronx. Those folks snitched, and they wound up telling the prosecutor, and it was the prosecutor that told the judge, I don't think this individual actually is from a community that we can pull from. And so there was a lot of back and forth about whether or not to keep this juror. And the paramount concern obviously being, we nix this Black man, we're really messing with the diversity on this jury.
When we think about the qualifications to serve on a jury, regardless of what jurisdiction you're in, right, there is this thing in the Sixth Amendment. It's called the vicinage clause, which basically talks about the jurors, the jurors that are selected for the case need to be from the community where the harm is alleged to have been committed. Why is that important?
So it's interesting. And so that's one of the things that, you know, I think about a lot, right? Especially when we're talking about people power. You know, folks from the Bronx, right? Even though you're from the Bronx, I'm gonna throw my X up in the air, right? Every block in the Bronx has a different personality, right? So my block may have a completely different feel, may have a completely different personality than the folks on the other block. And if you kind of know, you know, right? And so when we're thinking about the individuals that we think are appropriate to cast judgment on us, we want folks that either know or understand the experiences that we have, whether that be as individuals or in the community. And so one of the qualifications for a juror is to come from the particular community. Obviously, all jurors are not going to come from, or maybe any jurors are not going to come from my block. But what I can sort of rest assured in is that I'm getting a juror from the Bronx, because a juror from the Bronx is going to have a completely different experience or perspective potentially than a juror from Westchester or a juror from Manhattan or a juror from Staten Island. I don't know what happens in Staten Island, but you know, depending on the community you're from, right, that will reflect sort of the opinions and perspectives that you may have. And that's what we want in that box.
We want the representation of the community. The Juror Project, you know, we have a lot of different goals, but the three ones we like to remind people of is we're trying to increase diversity of our jury panels. We want to improve people's perspective of jury service. And we also want to make sure that people are empowered with all of the things they need to know in terms of how to flex their power in the jury box. And sometimes that can take place in the form of jury nullification. Now, with this particular trial, do you recall what the gender breakdown was of the jury?
Yes, it was 4 women and 8 men. And the age range was somewhat wide, but I believe that there was like maybe someone in their 20s, but the age range was really from about mid 30s to like, I believe, early to late 50s, if I'm not mistaken. Don't quote me on that, but we did not have, you know, a young jury, a super young jury.
Okay, so I want to break down the juror experience a little bit. So just to give people, kind of to get folks caught up, you know, you get summons in the mail, you show up to the courthouse.
Because you answered the summons.
Because you answered the summons and you're excited to serve. You go through a jury orientation process and they say, all right, you got to serve on a jury for this period of time, let's say July 1st to July 14th, or whatever it might be. And then you go up to a courtroom, you participate in voir dire, which is a conversation between the potential jurors and the attorneys. And the prosecutor gets to ask the group of potential jurors questions. The defense gets to ask the potential jurors a set of questions. And then based on those questions, if the prosecution or the defense doesn't think a particular juror is a good fit for that case, they can remove that person. And we've talked about there being 2 different ways to remove a juror from a panel in the courtroom. Can you remind us what those 2 different ways are?
Yes. Are you talking about the preemptory challenges and the for cause challenges? Yes.
Yeah. What's the difference between those 2?
Actually, before we get into the difference between those two, I actually want to take a few steps back, right? Because if we're talking about the juror experience, I want to be fully transparent in what the juror experience is from the start, because what y'all not going to do is come to one of our trainings and be like, wait a minute, y'all made it seem like I was going to step in and step up and it was going to be all good. That is not what is going to happen, right? I participated in the juror service process, and baby, let me tell you, if you live in a jurisdiction where you can call in to see if they need you, which I wish my job did that. Not you, Will, you my favorite boss, but my other job. But if you are a prospective juror, if you live in a jurisdiction where you can call in, lucky you. Because what that means is you don't have to travel all the way down to the courtroom and sit and wait. That is vital. I really want to be fully transparent with y'all. I'm not trying to sell y'all no wolf tickets about this experience. You will get the summons. You won't answer the call because you dove and you came to this talk, right? But it's possible that if you live in a jurisdiction where you have to physically show up to the court, you can wait all day before you find out if you're needed for the day. And judges don't always respect time. And I want to be honest, right? Because one of the things that we talk about at the Juror Project is community mindset and why people don't want to participate. And I want to honor and respect the fact that it can be disrespectful to your time. I do want to be honest. Will you get coffee? No. Will you get lunch? No. No. That unfortunately is also embedded in the juror experience if you live in a jurisdiction that forces you to come in, like New York. But fast forward.
Appreciate that.
So what you asked me, which is what is the difference between a preempt and a for cause? So a for cause challenge, I'm going to start with that. If a juror says something that makes us believe that they cannot be fair and impartial, we will raise a for cause challenge. This juror can't sit, right, for this particular reason. And I have to, as an attorney, be able to articulate why that juror can't sit. And it's oftentimes things like a person has a bias, right? Meaning, I don't ever believe that police officers can lie. I have had horrible experiences with police, so therefore I just cannot even listen to a testimony. I don't believe a kid could ever lie. I don't believe any person would ever lie about this particular topic. I hate Black people. I'm homophobic. Whatever it is you can think of that would appear as if there is some bias is one of the things that could disqualify you. And if you essentially say that, one of the lawyers will bring up a for cause challenge. And you have to be able to articulate what the individual said that made them biased. I'll never forget, just quick story. I was picking a jury and my client was accused of harming an animal. For all you animal lovers, I'm sorry about this story. But there was a juror. I mean, the chick basically had a zoo in her house. And she said that she could never, ever, ever treat someone fairly that is just accused of harming an animal. She got nixed that way. But I raised the for cause challenge in that particular instance because she had already made up her mind before she heard any evidence. Does that make sense?
It does. And I appreciate that example because we are identifying whether or not there is a bias towards the person who was accused of the crime, right?
I know you want them next.
And that is who has the Sixth Amendment right to, have a fair and impartial jury, to select their jury from a fair cross-section. I want to talk about what I think is a legal myth. And the legal myth and the legal fiction is this idea that the jury is impartial on its own, right? When in actuality, it is the individual partiality of the juror that creates the impartiality of the jury. So what I mean is if we acknowledge that the Sixth Amendment says you have a right to a fair and impartial jury, a jury of your peers, right? You're selecting your jury from a fair cross-section, a representative sample of the community. There are people in my community right now who don't always trust the police. And there are people in my community right now who do always trust the police. if we can get those two people on the jury, right?
Invited out? I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
and they can come to an agreement, right? They kind of balance each other out. But if we have a system that kind of promotes a certain pro-government or pro-state, pro-prosecution mindset, then we aren't securing an impartial jury. We are securing a jury that is slanted almost in favor of prosecution. I want to offer a different example. Let's talk about the death penalty. Right. So if we all agree that the Sixth Amendment says you have the right to select your jury from a fair cross-section of the community, and that you have a right to have a jury of your peers, in death penalty cases, there's something called death qualification, where jurors are asked whether or not they can impose a death penalty if the person is found guilty. If you say no, you are not allowed to serve on that jury. And I think that is really just contrary to what the Sixth Amendment is about. The Sixth Amendment says you get to have a jury of your peers, you get to select your jury from a fair cross-section. If there are people in my community who do not believe in the death penalty, why don't I get to have them on my jury? Those are my peers. They are part of my fair cross-section, but the system doesn't allow that, right? And we need to be very critical about how the system is currently designed in favor of securing convictions instead of being in favor of protecting liberty. And that's what we have to be arguing about, is how are we protecting and safeguarding the liberty that we are also thankful to have, because ultimately what the prosecution is trying to take away is our liberty, is our freedom, and they're trying to basically put people in prison.
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. And I remember the first time you said that, it really had me thinking that, you know, as lawyers, we should be arguing more for, you know, for individuals. I'm obviously a defense attorney, so I'm never going to be arguing for somebody that is pro prosecution or pro police on my jury. But I hear your point. I hear your point. It is valid and it makes total sense. You know, I actually, pausing right there, I want to name two things that are wild, right? And it's not just the fact that we select jurors that ultimately lean one way, right? Whether we're talking about death penalty cases and an individual that cannot put someone to death or sentence someone to death can't be put on a jury, but also individuals that seem pro-defense are often also kicked off juries as well, right? But I want to, because you know I'm very light, and I want to make sure that I want to name two other things that are really interesting about juror service, right? One is I once saw this meme, I don't know if you've ever seen it, Will, where they're like, jury duty is wild, right? They're like, they will tap you in, they will send you that summons, and they will be like, yo, homie, come solve this murder for $23. That shit is crazy. That shit is crazy. And so, you know, while we are talking about the juror experience, I want to be very clear, right? That what you are being asked to do, despite the fact that Will and I will come into your office and come into your communities, and right now we in your homes and maybe your cars, right? We understand that what you are asked to do as a juror is a tall order, right? You are paid $23 to go in and solve that crime, right? But the other piece that I think is wild is just going back to what you talked about, right? So you had, let's say that in a perfect world, right? We had individuals that were both pro-prosecution and pro-defense, and we bring them together, right?
Yeah.
But even without that, the request to ask 12 strangers with different life experiences to come together and have a final decision on someone's liberty, on someone's life outcome is wild. And I want to make sure that we are explaining to the audience, and they know, we know that it is a tall freaking order. I was once in a training, and this judge named that. And it was one of the most brilliant ways to sort of say what the juror experience is like, right? And a few weeks ago, when we did a training at Legal Aid in Manhattan, I used the same example, right? And it is literally, I offer to pay each one of you, right, out there, we all 12 of us, right? I hope there's more than 12 of you out there, but let's say that there's only 12 of us, right? And I say, look, I'm going to pay for everything. I'm going to pay for your appetizer. I'm going to pay for your entree. I'm going to pay for your dessert. I'm going to pay for your drinks on drinks on drinks on drinks, right? But there is one requirement. Everyone has to agree on the drinks on drinks on drinks, on the appetizer, on the entree, and on the dessert. Could you imagine 12 people, despite the fact that I said I'm paying for everything from the rooter to the tutor, 12 people being able to agree on drinks, on appetizers, on entrees, on desserts?
That's a tall order.
Yeah, it is wild. But going back, because I just be doing my own thing. Will, but going back to what you originally were asking about, which is the for cause challenge and the preempts, right? So the preempts, and it's something that you talk about a lot. Can you tell us a little bit more about what a preempt is and how Black people on juries?
Yeah, so you explained cause strikes is one way to get somebody off. If they kind of demonstrate that they can't be fair, they can't be impartial, then they're going to get struck for cause, essentially. Peremptory strikes are a little bit different. So there are an unlimited amount of cause strikes, but there are a limited amount of peremptory strikes, and it changes based on the jurisdiction that you are in. Peremptory strikes didn't always exist, but peremptory strikes also did not always apply for both the prosecution and the defense. The defense has had access to peremptory strikes historically, and it wasn't until Black people got the right to serve on juries that prosecution now had the right to peremptorily strike people, particularly recognizing that once Black people started getting access to this power of the jury box, the government wanted to have a tool in its toolbox to be able to remove some of those Black folks if they couldn't sufficiently remove them for what's called legal cause. So peremptory strikes are often viewed as one of the tools that are utilized in this concern about juror discrimination. And juror discrimination can take place in all the different stages of curating the jury. It's often most visible in that final stage during the voir dire process, because you can see a prosecutor or you can see a defense attorney removing a particular demographic of people from the jury. And if that's obvious, there are challenges that you can make. Batson versus Kentucky is the case that's often referenced to create this protection against juror discrimination. There are states like California, Washington, Connecticut, New Jersey, I think maybe even Colorado, that are doing a little bit more to give more protections around what Batson was initially intended to prevent, because Batson doesn't do enough. But peremptory strikes are another tool to remove people from the jury. You don't have to provide an explanation. They are limited in number. And the only way in which you kind of learn the reason why a juror is allegedly being struck is because you have raised a Batson challenge. And the Batson challenge is a 3-step process. Let's say I notice that the prosecution is removing all of the women from the jury. I'm going to raise a Batson challenge, say prosecutor striking juror 7, 9, 10, 11. They're all women. My client is a woman. I think they're trying to increase their chances of winning. And then step 2, the prosecutor has to say, I'm not being sexist. Here are my reasons for removing the women from the jury. And then step 3, the judge has to decide whether or not the explanation that was provided was race neutral or gender neutral. So peremptory strikes are another tool in which jurors can be removed from the jury panel, and they're not always going to know the reasons why. I see we have a question, and I'm going to take this moment to ask you all to share this live stream with your folks. We want more people to be joining this conversation. We are trying to remind people of the power that they have in the jury box. And one of the ways in which we can realize that power is just understanding how this system works. So one of the questions that we have is there something that can be done financially to motivate people to want to go for jury duty? I have two ideas. One is an example, and one is an idea that I actually learned from a student in one of my classes. So first, to answer this question about financial incentives, I want to highlight this program in San Francisco called Be the Jury. Our brother Brendan Woods with the Alameda County Public Defender's Office was very involved in getting this going. And it essentially pays people who are low to moderate income $100 a day to serve on the jury. And the impact of $100 a day from an increase of, I think they were maybe getting $25 a day or something like that, was very obvious. The juries were more representative. They were more diverse. More people from lower to moderate income were able to participate in this civic duty. And so there absolutely is an opportunity to address juror pay and increase juror pay to incentivize people to come to serve on a jury, because the law is very, very strong in protecting you as a person from not getting fired for showing up for jury duty, but your employer does not have to pay you. So you take your time off to go serve on a jury, you're not making money. And that makes it a little bit more difficult for certain people to be able to serve. There are literally folks who cannot afford to serve on a jury. And so now they're deciding whether or not to go to work, make money to be able to pay money for bills and for childcare or whatever it might be, or do I go serve on a jury, right? So this question about financial incentives is really, really important. The second thing I wanted to lift up from you that I learned from my students as an idea around financial incentive, when we think about approaching legislators and saying, hey, we need to raise the amount of money we are paying jurors, they're always like, where's the money going to come from? And juror pay is such a low, it's on the bottom of the list of financial concerns in most jurisdictions. So what my students came up with when they were creating this model juror statute as part of their project is they said, instead of giving the jurors more money, you can provide them vouchers. So let's say you have $100 owed in parking tickets. That voucher will waive that amount that's due. Or let's say you have $100 in late fees for your energy bill or whatever it might be, that could be waived. You think about different bills that might come from the city or the municipality, that little waiver could be an incentive to be like, all right, well, I can't actually get the money, but I can get some debt relieved. I thought that was a really, really cool idea that the students came up with.
Brilliant.
Right?
That's brilliant.
So the question about money incentive is really, really important because folks aren't getting paid enough. I believe the average juror pay around the country is about $16 a day. And that's if you actually serve on the jury.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You have some really brilliant students. And we have a comment. Dr. Farrow 624 wants to give you a shout out. You came and spoke to the Juror Diversification Group in Buffalo. Absolutely. He deserves his flowers, and I'm so glad he's getting them. And actually, I want to pause for 1 second. For those of you that may have just joined us, the Juror Project is Will's brainchild. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for his commitment to clients and community. And so, on the heels of his birthday, I love that he is getting his flowers because, people talk about how important juror service is. I'm a defense attorney. I'm in rooms all the time where folks are talking about how important juror service is and how we need to educate communities. And so, Will actually, put boots on the ground. And he literally made it so that we have created this space to have these conversations. So absolutely shout out to the director of the Juror Project. And thank you, Dr. Farrow.
I appreciate that. And thank you, Dr. Farrow. You can't say boots on the ground around me and me not thinking about the dance. And I'm thinking about
I was killing it this past weekend. Oh my God, we got 57 fans. Don't even play with me. You done messed up my curls. Oh, I love boots on the ground.
They banned fans from Carnival Cruise because people were acting up on that damn song.
I'm not gonna lie to you. The other for Juneteenth, I don't care where I was. That beat dropped. Boom. You want to talk about creating community, baby. I was
I love
involved.
it.
I'm sorry, y'all. I'm sorry. I'll be taking.
No, I love it. Porsha, I have
Little
a, I have
breaks.
a
We're supposed to be educating y'all. Sorry.
listen. We're having at least I'm having a good time. I do want to talk about this expectation of jurors, right? So to your point, you referenced the meme of like, wait, people want to pull me off the street, pay me $20 a day and solve a murder. Like, what the heck is that about? Right. It also makes me think about another meme as it relates to what's his name? Stanley from The Office.
Yes. Yes.
And he talks about how he loves jury duty because he gets off of work and they're going to feed you and he gets to judge people. So I appreciate the meme. But my question for you is like, what is expected of jurors? Like, obviously they're voting, guilty or not guilty, but there's a different layer to the criminal culpability that I want you to kind of break down a little bit. And you've used these terms before, mens rea and actus reus. Like, yes. What is that? And how does it apply to what the juror's job actually is?
Absolutely. I did a trial recently, and one of the things that the juror said is I don't understand. I didn't go to law school. How am I expected to understand these terms? Like I don't have experience with any of these terms. And you want me to just hear it one time and understand what they mean and then make a judgment about someone's life. So for those of you that are not lawyers out there, in order to be found culpable of a crime, there are two requirements that must occur at the same time. Okay. And I use my hands to demonstrate for all you visual learners, right? So the first thing is mens res. That is a guilty mind. So when you hear that the person had the intent, right, that means that when they did the act, they desired a specific outcome. When I punched him in the face, I wanted to hurt him, right? When I got in my car drunk, it was to get to the next destination, even though I was intoxicated, right? So I had a guilty mind. And different crimes require different mind states. But the first thing you need to understand is that one must have a guilty mind. The second thing that one must have is a guilty act, right? And that's whatever the crime is. That is robbery, right? So I'll give you an example. In New York, right? One of sort of the elements of robbery or the legal definition of robbery is, right, taking and carrying away of someone's property, right, with threats or force with the intent to permanently deprive. If you are not a lawyer, it is literally me saying, want to you, right? So the guilty act, right, is taking away and carrying away someone's property without permission. That's the guilty act. The guilty mind is, I ain't giving you that shit back, right? The intent to permanently deprive. Now, when you are a juror sitting on a criminal case, a judge does not break it down like that, right? Nobody breaks it down like me. I'm kidding. I'm just messing with y'all. A judge, all they tell you is what the legal definition is. And now, don't get me wrong. In the juror instructions, there are examples, right, of what the intent could be, right, or an example of intent. But the judges are married to what the piece of paper says they can read to y'all. Because if y'all confused, it's because the language is confusing, right? And that's why we here. So keep coming to our live so we can break these terms down for you. But again, remember, y'all, stay with me because there's going to be a pop quiz. In order to be guilty of a crime, you have to have a guilty mind and a guilty act at the same time, right? That's the only way. And so every single crime across this country requires the exact same thing. So if you are picked for a jury in Kansas, it will require a guilty mind and a guilty act in a criminal case. If you are picked for a jury in Chicago, it will require a guilty mind and a guilty act. Now, the language of those different crimes may change slightly, but they generally are articulating the same concepts.
It's a brilliant breakdown, and I appreciate you naming those two different elements for us. I'm also reminded that we got some folks who are taking the bar exam in a couple of weeks, and so
good luck to y'all. Good luck to y'all. I'm rooting for y'all. Sending y'all all the good juju.
So we have this expectation of jurors to essentially understand how the prosecution is demonstrating that the accused person has both the guilty mind and the guilty act. The other thing I want you to break down are these jury instructions. Well, before we get to jury instructions, let's get to evaluating evidence. How should jurors be evaluating evidence as it relates to their understanding of the guilty mind and the guilty act?
So, oftentimes in criminal cases, depending on the evidence in the case, I'm battling either both or one of those, right? Defense attorneys often don't go to trial unless they have a defense to either the guilty mind or the guilty act. And I'll give you an example of that, right? Let's say that let's say that I'm arrested for assault, right? And the prosecutor presents video to the jury of me punching someone in the face, right? That's just one of a few pieces of evidence they present to the jury, okay? And as my defense attorney would try, right, to create a defense to that video of me punching someone in the face. It could be she was justified, right? That person was fucking with her, so she was fucking with them back, right? So that's one way, right? And so when jurors are evaluating this evidence, right, they're looking at it again to figure out, where does this evidence fit in with the guilty mind or the guilty act, right? And I want to just pause for a second, because again, we started this conversation off with for you latecomers, we started this conversation off with the reason that we were engaging in this talk is because I had been watching the puppy trial. I'm not taking a position on the verdict. I'm just simply saying it got me to really think about the juror experience. Now, going back to the guilty mind or the guilty act, right? One of the things that the jurors in that trial had to experience is watching really salacious videos over and over and over again, right? And hearing very salacious testimony over and over and over again, right? And so it was those pieces of evidence that the prosecutor was trying to put in to show either the guilty mind or the guilty act. And that's all I'm gonna say about that.
I appreciate that. One defense theory that I love is the Shaggy defense. It wasn't
me. It wasn't me. Argue with your mama. It wasn't me, baby. That's my favorite.
Thinking about the juror experience, thinking about the reality that in evaluating evidence for the purpose of being able to say this person is guilty or not guilty, there's going to be residue in our minds about what the jurors have had to watch, right? If it's a murder case, if it's a case involving sexual assault, if it's a case involving violence, you don't just deliver your verdict and then leave and just leave that stuff in the courtroom. That sticks with you for some time.
Absolutely.
What are some of the resources you think that the court should be providing to help minimize the potential trauma or the potential harm that jurors might experience? And I would remind folks that you are not only a lawyer, you also are a social worker. So you have some really unique perspective and insight into the things that the court could be providing for jurors after experiencing some of this, what could be described as secondary trauma.
What's funny was I thought you was going to ask me what services do courts provide, and I was ready to be like, not nothing. Actually, so the idea is actually not mine. The idea, when you and I were talking a few days ago, in this burger place where I did not get a burger, but we were talking about the fact that services should be provided for jurors, right? When I think about some of the reactions that folks talked about when the jurors were experiencing some of these videos and hearing some of these testimonies, and how individuals were describing how gut-wrenching and how, you know, people were having visceral reactions to things. And I think about my own cases where, you know, the prosecutor has shown like really horrible and graphic injuries, or really tough video, or the jurors had to experience really difficult testimony. And then again, right, we give them their little $40, $72, $16, and we peace out. And I think it is incumbent upon, you know, the criminal legal system that if we are calling folks in from the community to do this type of service, we really do have to care for them afterwards, because it does stick to them. We can't be like, oh, we hope you get a therapist. And I believe you had the brilliant idea of, you know, proposing to some of these juror commissioners to have folks, you know, at the ready to talk to individuals, or at the very least offer it to individuals. Like, I know what you saw was fucked up in there. Here's what we have to help you.
Absolutely. I'm not going to let you just kind of squeeze by the comment that we had a working lunch at a burger place and you got a chicken sandwich. So
I did get a chicken sandwich. It was such a good chicken sandwich, though. It was a really good chicken sandwich. But what we don't do is give credit to those fries. Those fries was slamming, Will. I was disappointed. I'm sorry. For those of you who don't know, every single time I'm in New Orleans, Will introduces me to a new place.
We got the best food.
And this place
New Orleans is ranked #1 for food in the world. So I want to remind us that when people have a negative mindset about jury service, it could be coming from a variety of different places.
Absolutely.
One of the places can be, look, I don't want to be exposed to looking at autopsy photos. I don't want to be exposed to being forced to watch a video of somebody pulling a trigger and killing somebody. And that's a very valid concern, because if nothing else, we got to protect our energy. We got to protect our spirit. We got to protect our mindset. So I get that. If we want to change that mindset a little bit, or at least perhaps offer a little bit more support or comfort in the perspective of jury service, if jurisdictions actually had some after trial group conversations, or had social workers or therapists on call, like a number that could be called afterward, I think that would actually really improve people's overall juror experience. And so I didn't come up with that. That was another great idea that somebody brought to me. And there's some folks in New Orleans who are trying to brainstorm with the Juror Project in terms of what that could look like. So I'm excited to kind of brainstorm and ideate what that might be able to, what shape that could take, and share that with you all. I want to start encouraging people, if you're tuning in, hit us with some questions. We want to not only come to these conversations with things that we think we should be sharing with you all, we also want to answer any questions you might have. And as you're typing those questions in whatever platform you're watching, I do want to just highlight our good friend, Dr. Farrell, is sharing that they're doing a study in Buffalo, and they're going to share the results when it's complete. And we really look forward to seeing those results as well.
Thank you, Dr. Farrell. I went to college in Buffalo. Hey. Come on, y'all. If y'all got questions, ask them. We're not here for a long time. We're here for a good time. So if you have questions, please shoot. That's what we're here for. You know, we care deeply about unpacking this experience for y'all, because I mean, I know that the regular schmegular person does not have, or is not privy to the experiences, right? Me and Will are paid to be in court all day, every day, Monday through Friday, you know, sometimes on the weekend. And so, you know, these experiences we sometimes take for granted. I'm not going to lie to you. You know, hearing about the juror experiences in many of the more recent cases, right? Even thinking about the Luigi Mangione case, right? Like the fact that the trial is coming up and we only saw a clip, you know, of what the individual, I'm not saying it was Luigi, because he's innocent until proven guilty. But we saw a clip of an individual pull out a gun and shoot somebody, right? And we almost sort of, because of, you know, we are constantly receiving violence, whether it be in our communities, whether it be on the news, whether it be on social media. And me as a defense attorney, I'm not going to lie to you. I struggle. I struggle with many of the videos that I see, the pictures that I see. It is hard stuff to watch. I mean, I have what some would say are, healthy ways of dealing with stress and grief, and some unhealthy, because I will drink an old fashioned in a New York minute. But I am privileged enough to have resources to help me get through these things. And as community members that are participating in these heavy experiences, you may not. And so if there's anything you want to know about the Juror experience in the time that we have left, which is about 1 or 2 minutes, feel free to ask.
I echo that. And I want to go back to what we titled this particular talk, which is underneath this concept and this idea that people first is people power. And earlier today, I was kind of sharing this message about our United States Constitution, and particularly thinking through how symbolically the framers of the Constitution very intentionally chose the branch of government that represents the people to be the very first article in our Constitution. Because remember, this was coming at a time when we were trying to separate from a tyrannical king who was mistreating the colonies and mistreating the people, depriving them of a jury trial, all that type of stuff. And in an effort to not repeat the sins of the king, they wanted the most power to be concentrated with the people. And if we think about our government in the United States, there's supposed to be this idea of checks and balances. Article 1 is supposed to be for the legislative branch. Article 2 is for the executive branch. Article 3 is for the judicial branch. And when we think about a representative sample of that checks and balances, it's kind of present in our courtroom, right? Article 3 is represented by the judge. Article 2 is represented, the executive branch is represented by the prosecutor. And Article 1, the power of the people, is represented in the jury box. You all are watching news like I am. We are hearing people being arrested for things we have not seen people be arrested for before. I think about my home city of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and hearing the news of a judge being arrested for allegations of helping an undocumented person evade apprehension by some ICE agents. If you think that that was improper, if you think that that was wrong, right? If you think that these types of politically motivated prosecutions and arrests is not consistent with the values you understand to be the country of America, one of the most American things that you can do is you can be excited about serving on a jury. You can show up. And if you sit for a case like that, know that you have the power to vote not guilty. It's called jury nullification. It's called voting your conscience. It's called ensuring that you are flexing the power of the people. Because we have to realize that jury nullification is something that the framers were aware of when they were resisting a tyrannical king, trying to enforce bogus laws in our country. And now when we see the application of bogus laws, if you think they're bogus, I think they're bogus, we can be in the jury box. And this can be a different form of civil disobedience that we're not talking about enough. So when we put people first, we know the people power that exists in that jury box. We want all of you to join us in spreading the message about the importance of jury service so that we can not only create a justice system that's worthy of its name, because as you have heard, neither Porsha-Shaf nor myself have called it a criminal justice system. We use a framing criminal legal system because both of us have worked in this legal system for many, many years. And the thing that has consistently been missing has been justice. But one of the reasons why we're doing this work is because we are optimistic, we are hopeful, and we actually know and are convinced that with you and the power of the people present in that jury box, we can actually bring more fairness to our criminal legal system. We can make sure that the values that we have as people are reflected in our criminal legal system. And we can have more conversations and different conversations in terms of what accountability should be looking like in America. It doesn't solely rely on putting people in cages. I want to thank you all for joining us this evening. We do this once a month. We need you all to help us spread this message. So if you enjoyed this conversation, make sure you share our information with folks in your network. Stay in tune with the things that we're doing. Join us next month, and I hope everybody has a good night.
Absolutely. You have the power to change someone's life. Please, 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 if you get that summons, answer it. Good night,
Everybody.
everybody. Oh, wait, before we go, wait. Laddergram Mary.
That's my sister.
Hey, Miss Mary. It would be interesting if
And
employers
my
were
brother-in-law
incentivized.
and my nephew Felix. It's
First
all
of
three of
all,
them.
can we talk about the fact that I love how your family shows up? Yo, they don't play. I love it. If it ain't your mama and your daddy, it's your sisters too. I love that. I love that. But I do want to highlight what your sister said, which is dope, is it would be interesting if employers were incentivized to support employees participate in a jury service, just like what Will said earlier, which would be potential, what did you say earlier with vouchers? That would be super, super dope. Thank you so much, Will's whole family, for always showing up and showing out. We appreciate you. So thank you to everyone who is not Will's family, who came to support the Juror Project as well. Thank you so, so much. And please remember to answer those juror summons, because I cannot stress enough, you can change someone's life.
I'm gonna add one thing to my sister's comment. One of the items we've been working on in New Orleans with the New Orleans Business Alliance is creating a policy for employers to adopt that when their employees get summoned for jury service, they do not have to take sick leave or personal time off. They are paid in the exact same way as if they showed up to work. This is applicable, in some organizations already, but if we could have employers really get behind this type of compensation package, not a compensation package, but this compensation policy for jury service, we can help remove this financial barrier that sometimes people are worried about. So I really appreciate the comment, Mary, Fernando, and Felix. I always appreciate y'all showing up to support.
And shout out to everybody who showed up. This is our ninth goodbye. Well, we for real. We are for real. We are going.
It's like we're at a family reunion.
Not enough. Yo, first of all, we've been sitting here for 93 minutes and nobody talked to us. Now everybody want to bust up in the place. And I love that for us. So we're going to stay and talk. What has happened
what has
for
to
that
happen
to go into effect? What has to happen for that to go into effect?
This is something that employers have at their discretion, right? They like passing policy within an organization is typically something that the board of directors has to vote on, or maybe even the executive director or the leadership team. They just vote on it, and it's just something that they institute. And when they think about part of their benefits package, right, they can include 25 days of personal time off and paid jury duty service or jury service, whatever it might be. It's not a lot. Like, we don't have to go to legislation or anything along those lines. If it's a private company, they can change it. Now, if it is a public organization, like you work for the city or something, there might be different hoops that we have to go through. But for those organizations that aren't, the city government or state government or federal government, this is a fairly easy thing to be able to institute within your organization. So if you are an employer, or you are a manager, or you are working on some type of leadership team within your organization, go to work tomorrow. Be like, look, I was listening to Will and Porsha-Shaf last night, and they encouraged me to look at what is our leave policy for jury service. And when I opened up our personnel manual, I realized we didn't have one. So this is what we should do. When an employee gets a summons in the mail and they present us with that summons, they do not have to take personal time off. We will pay them as if they showed up to work like a regular day. So that's what I think it takes for that to go into effect. This is kind of an individual decision, and it's something that I hope we can have catch on.
Just checking before we try it again, because it's going to be our fourth goodbye. Y'all good?
I appreciate Fernando sharing that he's gaining some knowledge.
Hey, that's what's up, Fernando.
Yeah. This was. I'm glad you were all able to tune in. And Porsha-Shaf, thanks for joining, and we'll catch you all next time.
All right, we good. Bye, y'all.